Diwali, the blessings, the love, the joy is very special. It's very tangible. And we know that those same blessings are available to us every day of the year. And yet it's a little harder to access them. But this is one of the goals of the spiritual path, is to be able to make those blessings as tangible any day of the year as they are when we feel them in the air at Diwali. In one sense, Diwali is a celebration of good over evil, of light over darkness. But just what kind of light overcomes darkness and evil? It's a divine light. Some of us the other day who were recently in Badrinath, we were talking about the particular quality of Badrinath. Like it seemed like it could be a portal to another reality. Like the hikes we were taking, you could, with your next step, you could enter a different dimension entirely. Like a bridge between the physical and the astral worlds. And for the Pandavas, the story is that Badrinath was the stairway to heaven for them, where one by one they left their bodies and they entered into the light. And the mountains seemed almost impossibly close, like too close. The sky seemed too close. The colors seemed too brilliant. The snow on the mountains too white, and the sky too blue, and the brilliant colors in a rainbow that appeared on the mist in a waterfall. You know, how did they get so brilliant? What quality gave them that crystal clarity and that divine light? And the lesson for us in all of this is to bring that divine quality into our meditation, into our daily life, into interactions with others. And the more we evolve spiritually, the more naturally we live in that light, that slightly otherworldly light. And in the Gita, Sri Krishna tells us about this light. He says, in those who have banished ignorance, the true self shines forth with effulgence, like the sun. Yogananda Ji tells the story of when he was a young boy with cholera. His mother brought to him the photo of Lahiri Mahashaya, and she said, bow to the photo mentally. And he did so, and he said that there was a brilliant light that filled the whole room. And after that, he was healed from that light. Swami Kriyananda said, the divine light, pure, calm, liberating, is the only final cure for every kind of delusion, ill health, emotional grief, and spiritual ignorance. Seek light daily in silence, in deep meditation. There is a story I read of a young man in France during World War II, and he was working against the Nazis. And he said how when he was a boy, he became blind. But but that ever since he became blind, he observed this inner light. And he observed also that whenever I became impatient, he said, or I thought badly of other people, that light gently went away. And it was so pronounced in him because it was the only light that he ever saw. And because he couldn't see physical light, it was very dramatic when this inner light went away from him. And he yearned to be in touch more with that light. And eventually this young man was taken to a concentration camp. And he said, I became very ill, but then the light returned to me. And I began to see that everything was saturated with this light and sustained by this light. And everything lived by this light. And he said, when the light was with me, I didn't have to look out for myself. He then said that none of us have to look out for ourselves or worry about our needs. We just have to look to that inner light. Swamiji said that whenever we have a physical desire, we can't see the inner light. When we yearn for anything material, we can't see what is more subtle. When we're without attachments, and when we take our gaze away from the things of this world, then we can see the inner light. In his book, Awaken to Superconsciousness, Swami Kriyananda gives us a meditation on light, a meditation on the light at the spiritual eye. And he says to meditating there, to offer every thought, every feeling up at the light of the spiritual eye. And give yourself totally into that light, dissolving into that light. There's the beautiful story in the Bible of the prodigal son who leaves home, takes in his inheritance, and makes many mistakes, lives badly, becomes desperate, and he writes to his father, very ashamed of himself, "Can I return home?" And his other family members were against him. But when his father sees the young man coming home, coming close to home, the father runs out and embraces him and welcomes him and arranges a special feast in honor of the son. And this boy's brother was upset, and he said, "I've always stayed at home. I've always served you. I've always done the right things. You've never given me any sort of honor like that." And the father said, "You don't understand. You didn't need that. But this other boy, he was lost. And now he is found. And our Divine Father is just like that. Whenever we turn away from attachments, turn away from the things of the world that don't give us happiness, and we face the light, God the Father embraces us. He reaches down with both hands to bring us into that light that is always with us and is always our true home.
I love the stories in the Autobiography of a Yogi that our Guru tells us about light. I was just going to tell the Lahiri Mahashaya story, but we never compare notes, so I guess I won't tell that one. But one thing that is interesting about that story is that Lahiri had long left his body when Yogananda ji bowed to that photograph and prayed, and that flash of light came and healed him. And so, Yogananda is telling us this light is infinite, this light is eternal. And another story that illustrates that I often tell on Diwali is when Yogananda ji was meditating in his attic meditation room at 4 Garpar Road in Calcutta. He suddenly had a vision that he was a soldier and in World War I, and he was World War I, and he was dying on the battlefield. He had just been shot and he was dying on the battlefield and he was gasping for air. And so really in his meditation, he thought he was dying. And then just as he was sort of gasping for air and thought he was dying, suddenly he found himself meditating in the meditation room again and thought, whew, wow, that was interesting. And then all of a sudden, he was very relieved, but all of a sudden he was back on the battlefield gasping for air again. He tells this story himself. It actually is very sweet when he's telling it in a recording. And then he said, Lord, am I dying on the battlefield or am I meditating in my meditation room? Which one is it? Am I dead on the battlefield or am I alive in my meditation room? And the voice that came to him said, what does life and death have to do with light? So it's another story about how Master is saying light is eternal and infinite. And that's where we've come from, and it's where we're returning. And the way that Lahiri Mahashaya and Sri Yukteswar and Master have taught us how to tune into that light is gaze up at the spiritual eye. Everything in our practices has to do with gazing up at the spiritual eye. From the first moment we come to meditation class or we read any of their books, he's saying, gaze up here. In Hong Saw, gaze up here. You dive much deeper into the stillness when you remember to gaze up. Whether it's pranayam, whether it's listening to the Om sounds inside, whether it's doing Kriya Yoga, if we remember to keep our concentration here, everything goes much, much deeper. And of course, the deeper we go, the more we're able to see the inner light. And of course, Diwali, this festival, is about, this battle between the darkness and the light. And our whole soul's evolution is really this battle of what are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on divine light, or are we going to focus on everything else? Maya would very much like us to pay attention to her world. This world that has both light and dark. This world that has, a duality everywhere we look. And we can get so caught up in our daily, moment-to-moment detail of our lives. And that duality seems so strong. We feel separate, we feel alone, we want more money, we want more this and more that. It's just like anything to make me feel more secure because I feel separate. And that's what Maya's job is, to make us feel apart. And our egos are just saying, yes, you've got to take care of yourself. And yet the soul knows we are part of that infinite light. And that soul is always saying, and Yogananda was always saying, look at the beam of light that is creating this play of shadow and light. Remember to look back at the beam where everything came from. And if you remember to focus on the beam and the light, what created it all, then you're going to be just fine. And I love this story from the Autobiography. Actually, I wanted to just mention also that, Yogananda was so focused on on looking at the beam and having the perspective of the beam in everything he did, that when Swami Kriyananda and other monks were outside with him at the ashram in Los Angeles, Yogananda said one time, you just wouldn't believe how beautiful you all are. You're all beings of light. Because he was coming from that beam. He was coming from that perspective. Everything is made from light. And you are so beautiful. And I'll bet you those monks didn't look very different than we look. They looked probably very similar. And so if we could only see from the perspective of the great ones, that, always see the light in each other. This is how we lift each other up. This is how we become channels of Divine Mother's light, by seeing each other as light. I love this story in the Autobiography. I know you do too. So this is after Sri Yukteswar has written the book, The Holy Science. He was directed by Babaji. And he's finished his meditation and he goes down to Rai Ghat in Serampore. And as he goes down and takes his bath, he hears, "Greetings, Swamiji." I'll go back a little bit further. Just as I passed beyond the side of a large banyan tree near the riverbank, a strong impulse urged me to look back. There, under the shade of the banyan, surrounded by a few disciples, sat the great Babaji. "Greetings, Swamiji." The beautiful voice of the Master rang out to assure me I was not dreaming. "I see you have successfully completed your book. As I promised, I am here to thank you." With a fast-beating heart, I prostrated myself at his feet. "Param Guruji," I said, will you and your chelas not honor my nearby home with your presence?" The Supreme Guru smilingly declined. "No, child," he said. "We are people who like the shelter of trees. This spot is quite comfortable." The shelter of trees. This is what Babaji wants. And what are we trying to get a hold of? "Please tarry a while, Master." I gazed entreatingly at him. "I shall be back at once with special sweetmeats." When I returned in a few moments with a dish of sweet delicacies, lo, the lordly banyan no longer sheltered the celestial troop. I searched all around the ghat, but in my heart I knew the little band had already fled on etheric wings. I was deeply hurt. Even if we meet again, I would not care to talk to him, I assured myself. A few months later, I visited Lahiri Mahashaya in Benares. As I entered his little parlor, my guru smiled in greeting. "Welcome, Yukteswar. Did you just meet Babaji in the threshold of my room?" "Why, no," I answered in surprise. "Come here." Lahiri Mahashaya touched me gently on the forehead. At once I beheld near the door the form of Babaji, blooming like a perfect lotus. I remembered my old hurt and did not bow. Lahiri Mahashaya looked at me in astonishment. The Divine Guru gazed at me with fathomless eyes. "You are annoyed with me." "Sir, why shouldn't I be? Out of the air you came with your magic troop, and into the thin air you vanished. I told you I would see you, but didn't say how long I would remain." Babaji laughed softly. "You were full of excitement. I assure you that I was fairly extinguished in the ether by your gust of restlessness." I was instantly satisfied by this unflattering explanation. I knelt at his feet. The Supreme Guru patted me kindly on the shoulder. "Child, you must meditate more. Your gaze is not yet faultless. You could not see me hiding behind the sunlight." And with those words, in the voice of a celestial flute, Babaji disappeared into the hidden radiance. I love that story. And you know what? I mean, he's just saying, Sri Yukteswarji was restless. Your gaze is not yet perfect. So we need to perfect our gazing up. And yet, even when it wasn't perfect, Lahiri Mahashaya, the touch of the Guru, could just touch him and suddenly his perception had changed. You know, the scriptures say one moment in the life, in the company of a saint, can be a raft over the ocean of delusion. One touch of light, and we can be changed. Our chakras, our vibrations can change. So we have to ask ourselves, where is our attention? Yes, Yogananda said to gaze up at the spiritual eye, but what are we gazing at? Are we gazing at the light, or are we gazing at others in judgment and separation? We have this choice every moment, and our soul's evolution is just on a spectrum of how we're perceiving the world, what we're receiving from the universe. Are we opening to divine light, to hear his touch, to the touch of the Guru? Or are we tuning into something much different and much lower down our spectrum? Light attracts light. There's little fireflies in the south of America and in sort of hot tropical areas where suddenly, it can be complete darkness, and then one firefly will light. And then if one lights, suddenly another will light, and then another will light. And suddenly, in the darkness is all these little sparkles of light. Light attracts light. And when we call to the light, offer ourselves to the light every night, Swamiji says, offer all that we have, all that we are, all our thoughts and feelings, everything to that light at night to be purified. And the more we experience ourselves as light in meditation, as we gaze up more and more deeply and more often during the day, during our meditations at light, we begin to experience that light, expand our consciousness. And as we experience that light, it makes us long for it even more. We want to be one with that light. And as we long for it, we call it to us. And God's grace comes. Divine Mother comes as light. God can come to us in many forms. And He also can come as Himself, as He did with Krishna, with Christ, with Babaji, with our gurus, with Lord Rama. The avatar comes when we call. And so we'll do Swami Kriyananda's Festival of Light now. And that Festival of Light is about calling to the great ones to come. And it talks about our path, how we've come from God, how we stray from the path for a while, and yet how, God, through experiences, calls us back to Him. And that we pray that we may receive communion with God, with the gurus. And in that communion, and when we receive Him, He gives us the power to become the sons of God. He gives us the power to be channels of that light and share it with all. So we'll have the Festival of Light now.